Hey everyone, this is Derlene Hirtz with the Change We Must podcast. I am so excited to bring my guest today, Jeremy Stanton. But first, let me share with you what Change We Must is. This is a podcast dedicated to exploring the transformative power of mindset shifts in our personal and professional lives. I'm your host, Derlene Hirtz, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you through discovering your growth and all that lies ahead for you. In this fast-paced world, where change is a constant and success is often elusive, it is essential to understand that your key to success lies within you. Our mindset, the lens through which we perceive the world, shapes our thoughts, actions, and ultimately our reality. On this podcast, we dive deep into the profound impact of mindset on our ability to navigate life's challenges, seize opportunities, and thrive in both our personal and professional endeavors. We believe that change is not only necessary, but also an incredible catalyst for growth and success. Whether you're an entrepreneur striving for business success or an individual seeking personal growth, Change We Must will serve as your guiding compass on this transformative journey. Together, let's challenge the status quo, embrace change, unlock the extraordinary possibilities that lie with each of us. Get ready to ignite your mindset. Joining me today is Jeremy Stanton, and I'm super excited to introduce him to you guys. Jeremy and I met because he reached out, thank goodness, to networking. You guys know how much I love networking. Mm-hmm. And Jeremy is 46 years old. He's a musician and a vocalist. He's a United States Air Force veteran. Yay, America. Thank you for your service as always. And he's an entrepreneur. And he describes himself as a survivor, father, friend, pupil, and mentor. And I'm going to throw in there that he's not only a survivor, he's a thriver, which you're going to hear about in just a little bit. So, Jeremy, I am super excited to introduce you to my world and allow people to grow through your experience and just kind of share what I told Jeremy, you guys don't know this, but I just told him that I have to set my timer, which I will do right now, because we could talk forever and a day. So let's just talk about the first part of your story where you were sharing with me. Well, you know what, Jeremy, I'm going to let you choose. Where do you want to start?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Darlene. This is really, really fantastic for me. I often chomp at the bit or jump at the chance, if you will, to speak with like-minded people. While it's not quite as challenging or probably rewarding in the end as speaking with somebody that isn't like-minded and maybe finding commonality, I feel that as we sharpen the steel, so to speak, with one another, it improves us both, and it improves the way that we carry ourselves throughout the day, which in turn improves the way we interact with those who may become challenging. So I think it's very purposeful, and I'm very happy to be here. Having said that, where we start, being sort of molded into a military man, I love chronological timelines. So I'll share a little bit about myself and where I come from, and then wherever that goes, by all means, please lead us there. So I am 46, almost 47 years old. I am a father of two. I started that journey when I was 28. Prior to that, I'd been married for about 10 years. So at 18 years old, I was married to my high school sweetheart. We are no longer together. I still love her dearly, and I cherish all of the lessons that we taught each other, good, bad, or indifferent. But to get to that point of being in a relationship as an injured person with another injured person, there's a lot that went into that. It didn't happen easy. Those 18 years prior were tumultuous, and they were full of my own version of grief and my own version of sorrow, and not much acceptance or ownership of any of it, but a lot of finger pointing. So I'll tell this story, and I would like to do so with a smile on my face and a lot of gratitude, because as difficult as it was in the moment, I absolutely love who I am, and I love where I'm headed. And without any of those things, individually or as a whole, who knows what I would be, who I would be, or where I would be. So I tell this story from a lens of gratitude, not one of victimization or blame shifting or finger pointing. So please keep that in mind. Um, my mother came from a very, very stern upbringing on the farm in O'Fallon, Illinois. Her parents were from German farmers, from English farmers. They were very simple folk, but very smart, and very talented with their trade. They took it very seriously. And as most of us understand, they instilled a belief system in my mother, or did their best to instill a belief system in my mother that she adamantly opposed. So when she was 15, she would become pregnant with me. And by the age of 16, she would have given birth to me and been forced or told to leave the home. So a 16-year-old girl trying to find her way in the 1970s, when all she really wanted to do was, peace, love, and happy. She wanted to be a hippie, and she was born just after that movement, but still had it in her. So I guess her ship here got here a little late, so to speak. And so, God love her. She did the best she could. Along that journey, there were a lot of hiccups. Hiccups that I would go on throughout much of my adolescence just hating her for. And I don't even like to say that word these days, but that's what it was. There was a lot of hate because I didn't understand that she was doing the best with what she had. When she came from, originally her birth mother was not the mother that raised her on the farm and would eventually ask her to leave. Her birth mother suffered from a lot of pain herself, and in turn inflicted a lot of that on my mother. So my mother really just wanted to love and be loved. It's really the human experience foundation, right? Like, we want validation, we want acceptance, we want all these things. And her upbringing didn't allow for those. So when given the opportunity to show those things to me, she didn't exactly have the clearest of pictures on how to do it. And so we dealt with homelessness, we dealt with drug use, we dealt with her doing things that no young mother should ever even ponder doing, but she had to do them. And I won't go into details because I respect and love her, and I hold her in a new light these days. And so if she ever wants to tell that story, that's on her. But some of the things were very difficult, and they, as can be expected, I believe, caused this young man to become very angry. I was resentful at my mother. I'll give you a 30,000-foot view. I was very resentful with her for allowing people to treat her the way they treated her in relationships, family, whatever it may be. And I believe I was a seer of words in a young age. I saw things as probably most children do before they become covered or shrouded in a veil of this world. I saw the things, and I thought that I knew how to convey to her that, hey, I know you're the adult, but this is wrong. And so a lot of resentment grew in my belly, and I carried that with me for a long time. There were many, many years where we didn't speak, my own doing. My grandparents would, on my father's side, would eventually take me in. Father had left my mother and I in a homeless position shortly after I was conceived, or shortly after I was born. Uh, Somehow I held more animosity towards my mother, who was doing her best, than he who ran away. I sort of thought, that grass has got to be greener on the other side or whatever, and you drove him away. And I came up with all sorts of stories to appease myself, apparently. And that lasted a long time. That lasted, I would have said way too long, but apparently it lasted the exact right amount of time for me. I would then go on to find my wife, who was also injured as a young child. And again, I won't go into the details of her story out of respect and love for her. But let's just say that it was just as tumultuous and just as hard or difficult as mine was. I would then again feel like I could fix and feel like I could change, but I never could. I never learned how to accept. And after 30 years of being together and having two beautiful children, I finally learned how to accept. And when I learned how to accept with uh, I don't know really how to say this. I'm just learning these things now, Derlene, so please bear with me.
Mhm.
I learned how to accept that I was wearing a mask. I was living in the fog of the dream of the world, as Don Miguel Ruiz calls it. I was living in that mitote, that I had that poison running through me that made me think that I was right. It made me think that my way was correct. And when I came to, when I started to, the proverbial waking up, if you will, when I started to remember who I really was, and realized who I was portraying who I was, I believe that my wife at the time, she hadn't fallen in love with that person. She had fallen in love with a man who was angry, who would fight back, who would do all the things that I was learning were unhealthy. And I was learning in that moment that there was her truth and there was mine, and there was the truth of the world. And as I tried to align myself with my truth, or what I felt was the truth of where I came from and who I was supposed to be, I was misaligning myself with her truth. And that for me is something that is, I'm not going to say it's heavy, but when you can accept the role that you play in the demise of a 30-year relationship or a 27-year marriage, and you no longer point the finger, I mean, you both play a role in it. Um, that acceptance led to a gratitude in her being one of my greatest teachers. So where I could point fingers and I could say she did this or she did that, really it was all a reflection that I needed to see. It was me slinging my own hurt, my own avoidance, my own guilt, shame, remorse, all of the things, at that point it must have been 44, 45 years, 43, 44 years of it onto her, and then being upset when it came back to me, when I saw what I was actually given. So, again, a lot of gratitude in something that originally could have been viewed as a lot of, yuck or a lot of hurt. And so, during that relationship, I did have two beautiful children that continue to teach me a lot in their own way. And they don't even realize it. They're young, they're living their lives, but yeah, right, right? And so I'm finding myself in a place where um careers in the normal world don't suit me. And thankfully I've been retired from the military, and I don't have to go play in that world these days. So I am very, very fortunate and very thankful that I have time to read, I have time to meditate, I have time to walk, time to run, time to spend with other people that need or want my to share space with me. And I find a lot of peace in my days now. But I had to go through a lot of yuck to get here. And as I mentioned, we can go down any of those corridors because they all lead to really interesting places. My military career was just ripe with loss. Lost 19 airmen one day in Saudi Arabia back in the summer of 1996 at Dahran, Saudi Arabia at Khobar Towers. Um, Lost a lot of other civilians on another mission. It was a classified mission. But we were in the wrong place at the wrong time and they paid for it. Both accounts I left within minutes of it happening. So my life has been spared. And I dealt with a lot of survivor's guilt and a lot of post-traumatic stress from all of that. Um, I also dealt with stress from the conditioning that was just being a military member and becoming a cog in a wheel, and realizing later that yes, I do have patriotism, but no, I'm not a nationalist, and no, I'm not full of pride or bravado. And so I had to get over that, mask. I had to realize that that was just a false image that I was projecting and allowing to become a part of me. So I'm really, really blessed to have these realizations and to be able to sit with them and accept them because they make my days brighter. They make everything that I do better. They make the people that I come into contact with better because I'm not projecting my hurt onto them. I'm just being present. And when they speak to me, when we sit down and have this one-on-one conversation these days, no matter who they are, where they come from, or where they're headed, we both get up and walk away feeling better because there was listening involved. There was active listening, and it came from a loving place. I ensured it did. I didn't try to cast my judgment or my ideas onto what they had done or where they were trying to get to. I simply try to be present for people. And that does as much for me as it does for them. I would be remiss and I'd be a liar if I said it didn't.
Right,
So that's where I find myself more days than not, is just trying to be present and asking myself, okay, what is this about? Why do
right.
I find myself
Mhm.
in this swim lane on this day? Whether it was the vacation that I just took, with a beautiful partner that's in my life now, or and when I say that, I mean truly, like in moments, why am I here, and what is this about? What am I doing here? Because I know it wasn't just my free will that put me here. It was decades of moments and happenings and little grains of life that poured me through this hourglass into this vacation, into this moment with this other human. Why am I here? And when I ask that, the most important part for me is then listening
Right.
and
Oh,
understanding that when the answer comes, right, like I have to accept it. And so that's where I'm at these days. That's who I am and that's what I do. I just try to accept it all with grace and ask what this is about and then listen.
yep. And I'm going to push back. I don't think you try. You know what Yoda says, you do or you do not, and you do. I think that that comes across really, really clear. A couple of things that you said that, people do the best they can with what they've got. And for me, that is, it's very easy for me to accept that for other people. People do the best they can with the tools they have. Therefore, there's this situation, right? I found myself, um, it took me a little bit longer for me to forgive myself using that same tool or that same presuppositions, as we call them. If I presuppose that I did the best I could with the tools I had, oh, I wanted to go back being hard on myself. I would just default to that for a long time. It turns out that Jeremy and I both have neurolinguistic programming training. And when I was having this conversation with him, I was catching that, because although our lives are so very different in terms of experiences, although I got married at 19, right? My dad is a retired Air Force guy. My son is a lifelong Army guy. So, so much that we do get to intersect on, yet how we arrive to today being so different in terms of who we are. However, we've both dealt with those emotions that were so deeply, I can't remember if we talked about this the other day or not, but the emotions, it's always about the emotions. Our stories might be different, right? But having that emotion of abandonment, my word might not be yours, a whole different dynamic for me to feel abandoned, but it was so deeply ingrained that it still wears its ugly head today. I just have different tools and don't stay stuck in the story so long, right? Which is so, so cool.
Yeah, I would love to add to that real quick. Two things. First and foremost, like we all have this proverbial pile of junk that we stand that we've built for ourselves. A lot would say it was done to us. I like to live by the mantra that it wasn't done to me, it was done for me. It was
Amen.
on the job training for some purpose that only my higher self is probably privy to at this juncture in my path. So no matter if it's a young man or woman that approaches me and says, "Hey, I never did what I felt I should have done in the military," or somebody says, "My marriage is collapsing," and then they almost always want to go say something like, "Well, I know it's not as bad as what you dealt with," to which I always respond with, "Wrong. They both created the same emotions." So you're absolutely 100 spot on in my book. It has nothing to do with the action or the incident. It has to do with the emotion, how long we carry it for, and how it manifests itself in our lives. Does it manifest as dis-ease, whether that's just uncomfortability or a cancer, or does it manifest itself in the loss of something because we resisted something so heavily and so hard, and our purpose was so great that we had to experience a really great discomfort in order to get back in line or balance, right? We all have those piles, and we all need to realize, and I mean we really need to, for the greater good of the world, to realize that anything that happened to us was for something, right?
Right.
So that's my first thing. The other thing would be to address when you mentioned how difficult it is to forgive yourself, allow yourself some grace. I had this mantra that was taught to me by somebody that I thought was just absolutely out of his mind. One of my first NCO bosses in the military. And by all accounts, he was crazy, right? And I mean that in the most loving sense. It was like if you took every Clint Eastwood and every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie ever and combined them into one caricature, that was him. It was all bravado. It was all sealed up anger. It was all those things. But that was there by purpose for me. He said one thing to me one time that I will never, well, he said a lot of things, but this one thing he said, in this shop, in this organization, we see one, we do one, we teach one. That is to say that you have to see it being done before you can ever do it. You can't hear about it. And then once you see it done, you have to do it. And in the doing, you're teaching. Right? So others are seeing you. It's a reciprocal treadmill. It's a very, very nice hamster wheel to be involved with. So we can talk about forgiving ourselves, but until we see what forgiveness does for others, we don't understand what it can do for ourselves, right?
Right.
So we forgive somebody and we allow them to feel that forgiveness and to see somebody else forgiving so that they can forgive themselves or forgive others. For me, I realized that what that boss showed me in that moment was not just showing somebody how to work on something, a piece of equipment or a weapon or a system or a process. It was, if you pay attention with your heart and with your stomach, that gut biome, if you really get yourself in tune and you see things, you can do it. And if you do it, it will be teaching other people, right? So I just wanted to really sort of reiterate that, of course, we can't forgive ourselves. We have to forgive others first because we have to see what it's doing and we have to talk it and we have to find our own voice, so to speak. And we have to hear ourselves and have that aha moment of, oh my goodness, I've done this for these other people. Why haven't I done this for myself? And then once you do it for yourself, it becomes, as you all too well know, I'm sure, it becomes a way of life.
Yeah.
Whether it's somebody cutting you off in traffic or somebody takes your spot in line at the grocery store, you no longer even have the reaction in you to get angry. You immediately meet it with love. And I tell people all the time, hey, listen, I have nowhere to be. I'm right here. You go ahead. You have somewhere to be, go ahead. And I know that if they meet that with anything other than love in return, that it's not personal. It has nothing to do with me. But hopefully me showing them grace, forgiveness, love, kindness, whatever in its most basic form, at some point, they're going to remember that and they're going to give that forward to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's all connected. I really do. And I think that, you saying that man, it took you longer to do it for yourself than others I think it's the way it has to be. I really do.
Something that you said that kind of triggered me along in terms of forgiveness is that how that person in the beginning, right? So now I totally am like 100% congruent with that's on them. How they receive my offer of forgiveness is on them. In the beginning, as a kid, like let's just say as a kid, how they received that forgiveness and rejected it, right? The possibility of rejection. Within that, only then that model back to me is like, well, I'm not going to forgive myself. That didn't go so well when I forgave somebody else, so let's just hang on to that stuff
Right.
a little bit longer, and then when you
Well,
really
yeah, but I mean, that I'm so sorry.
okay.
All I was going to say was that what you're speaking to is the original form of punishment and reward that we've all accepted as agreements, right? Like if you love somebody and you forgive them and they hurt you in response and you take it personally, well, then you didn't get the carrot that you saw at the end of the string. You forgave them for the wrong reason, which isn't true forgiveness, right? When you forgive somebody or you love somebody unconditional, let's just throw that big damn subject out there. Unconditional love. That's where forgiveness comes from. When somebody can hurt you over and over again and you say, well, I still love you and I accept you. I don't like it. It didn't feel good, but it didn't feel good because I know you're hurting. It didn't not feel good because it hurt me. You can't hurt me. Only I can hurt me or allow somebody else to hurt me. Right? That's really where we need to find ourselves. If you have an expectation of acceptance or validation or some sort of forgiveness from them, it's never going to work out in its purest form. It's never going to be from that. And forgive me, I'll use a word from religion that shouldn't be, but that Christ consciousness. It won't be from that inner sanctum that is the church of our own body and our own soul. It won't be from that truest depth of our heart. That is a trick. That trick of like, let me do something for you so you do it back for me is a trap. And that's what's gotten us into a world of consumption, right? Like, I'm going to give you something, you give me something, and then I get something in return from it emotionally. Well, I mean, everybody knows money can't buy happiness. We all know that. Yet we search for it and seek it and use it as validation every day because of the old reward and punishment system that we've all been brought up in. Now, that system has been both like watered down, but it's also been exacerbated at times because it's not so much about like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to hit you anymore. That's sort of fallen by the wayside. But now it's like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to ignore you, or I'm just going to take away things. Well, if that's the case, then I don't know. We're just perpetuating the cycle, right? I mean, we're not doing anything better. We're just doing it different.
I want to go back to unconditional love because this is like it's part of my story, right? And so, and I'm even going to say the mindset of unconditional love. And just kind of given up how my projection or my perception of how you grew up. The mindset of unconditional love, what happened that you actually experienced unconditional love that you know it so well today?
Oh man, there have been so many instances that have fostered this, but I'll say it was like a homodulation of many moments, but I'll give you one that really stands out for me. And it happened through me. It wasn't really my doing. So again, 30,000 foot overview of the situation. My marriage and that relationship ended sort of how it started. The day we got married, there were tornadoes and thunderstorms. The day it all came to an end, if you will, at least the end of that part of it, there were storms of their own kind. So I was actually incarcerated, and I will say unjustly, but rightfully. I needed it. I went to jail for a few days. I was accused of doing something that wasn't entirely true, but the other party that was involved was in a hurt place, and that's where I'll leave that. I was also in a hurt place, but I was more of the observer in the role, seeing sort of how things were happening and trying to prevent them. But it was not. It was all bad. Long story short, I go to jail for 3 days, and not proud of it, but it's a part of the story that I think is really worth sharing with the world. So I'm in there with people that, whether they need to be in there or not, they're there. They made a mistake or they're accused of making a mistake, whatever it is, they're not happy they're there. Jail is not a quiet place. It's not an easy place to be. It's full of both dis-ease and disease. It is full of noise, chaos. I I found myself at once I got over the initial sort of shock and awe of this is where I find myself. What happened? And I got rid of the ruminations and the storytelling in my head. Why? Who is to blame? All that. I said, I'm going to sit in this corner and I'm going to meditate, but I'm not going to do it in a way that anybody knows I'm meditating. Thankfully, I'd been learning how to meditate for a few years up to that point. And to this day, I say that that's why. There was purpose in all of it. It was because in that moment, I had to do this. I was meditating. And as I meditated, I slipped further and further away from the noise. I slipped further and further away from the ruminations in my head and the blame shifting. And I started to just accept that this is where I'm at. So during the time, I do get pulled in and out of meditation, conversation, people wanting to ask the whole thing, why are you here? Blah, blah, blah. And in all of it, I found myself being the ear for these other people. They could just talk and talk and talk. And I didn't jump into the fire with them. I didn't tell them, oh, you're right, or you're wrong, or how dare they, or because that's what they want. In that moment,
Sure.
misery loves company. And you're surrounded by miserable people, whether they want to be or not. You're all miserable in that place. You're incarcerated. The sense of freedom that you have has been stripped away.
Right.
And that's for another conversation. We're not free until we really figure that part out. So that you become another version of the slave that we are in this world. So I'm sitting there, I'm listening, and about, I don't know, 36 hours goes by. Haven't really slept yet. I haven't eaten anything because that stuff that they give you there is not food. It is a substance, but it is not what, no. So I fasted, right? Something I was accustomed to doing. So I've fasted for about a day and a half. I've been meditating. I've been listening with a lot of love and two guys come in, and they are both not in a good way. They are loud. They are yelling. They are causing a lot of discomfort for other people, and you can't help but hear their story. So I find out that they are both coming down off of methamphetamines and heroin. They are one is handling it a lot better than the other. I'm assuming this is the first time one hasn't had it in some time. So throughout his detox, in the next day and a half, 2 days, I find myself giving comfort. I find myself no longer in my meditative state as I was, but now, mind you, I'm in jail with hardened criminals and people that don't know unconditional love. The president of a local chapter of a motorcycle gang, and I say gang because it's not a club that does a lot of great in my eyes, but there I was with him. And this guy is laying on the floor, writhing and screaming in agony, right? He's yelling things. The jailers and bailiffs are making fun of him. They're telling us to leave him alone. And I'm seeing humanity just being stripped out of this guy, right? So as he's laying there and he's shivering and he's sweating through the detoxes, little old me, never been in this position before, demanded everybody give me their blankets. Their only sense of comfort and normalcy in this place is this disgusting blanket that probably hasn't been washed. And it's scratchy and it's not comfortable, but I need this guy to feel warm. So I cover him with like 8, 9 guys' blankets. And I don't know why I'm doing it. It's not a conscious effort on my part. It's being done through me. It really was, Derlene.
I understand that.
This guy, he started, he was shaking. He was coming in and out of consciousness. He was in the throes of detox, right? And I've never been there, but I'm a human and I know what it's like to be suffering. So I started talking to this gentleman about his children that he was estranged from. I started talking to him about his upbringing. I started talking to him about anything that he could find comfort in when he was awake. And this bitch was screaming, is crying. And, by this point, nobody was coming around. The jailers and or the bailers or jailers, whatever they were leaving us alone. We had silence. Um, I started to rub this guy's legs and his feet to give him comfort and help keep blood circulating. Didn't know why. You know, Other grown men in the cell were crying. They didn't know why.
Wow.
But what was coming through me was an unconditional love for another human who I had no idea who this guy was. And one gentleman asked me, he said, "Man," he goes, "you can't be real." He goes, "What is going on? Were you put here by the county? Are you a plant? Are you a professional? Are you a therapist? What are you?" "No, man, I'm just like you. I just know that this guy's hurting, and what else am I gonna do? I could sit here and be miserable, but no, I'm gonna help him." And somehow I knew in helping him, it was helping me. But it was also helping an 18-year-old man that was in here, a boy. He finally stopped talking and just sobbed and started talking about how bad he felt about what he had done and how he just wanted his mom. These men saw something, and every time a new person would come in, I didn't have to tell them to be quiet so I could do this work. Everybody else did it for me. And they did it in a way that I couldn't have done. They did it with this bravado and this machismo that they could hear. They spoke in a language that these other people who were accused of being criminals could understand. Because in my moment, I was when I was at process, I was figuring out what conditional love was being shown in that moment, what it was by doing it. This is the first time I'd ever seen it with my own eyes. This is the first time I'd ever felt that it was being done through me for somebody else. It was being done for me. That was the see one, do one, teach one thing that I speak about. So I'll fast forward a little bit. He comes to, he's coherent, he's cognitive, he's aware. He's not shaken anymore. He's got the blankets off of him. He's warm. He's getting some of this food in him. He's feeling better. Um, People have stopped crying. People are starting to share stories of compassion with each other. There is a real sense of change in this one little cell. I'm going to be leaving. It's at the end of my time. I stay there. There's peace. There's quiet. There's calm. I'm realizing why I was there. I'm thanking my God for putting me in jail, Darlene. I am finding gratitude in sitting in a room with soiled underwear on the floor and uh you know and just disgust all around me. And this gentleman comes in wearing a red sweatsuit, red pants, red top, red hair, light skinned, very stereotypical Irish looking young fellow. Nothing but attitude. He sits down right next to me. I think myself, I don't have the energy to do this again. So now I'm learning acceptance. I'm going to be leaving soon. My work here is done. The gentleman, his name was Richard, helped through detoxes, sits down on the bench opposing us. And as soon as there is quiet outside of our cell again from the jailer letting him in, he proceeds to pull something out of somewhere in his pants, which I quickly understand is drugs, Xanax. And he says to everybody in the room, "I got some Xannies. Who wants some?" And he's looking right at Richard, who just came off of detoxes. And I look at Richard and I think to myself, you can't say anything here. I just look at Richard and I catch his eyes and he catches mine. And I just gave him a quick head nod back and forth, left to right, just as any like a father would to his kid, right? And Richard stops for a minute and then he looks at this young man in red and he says, "Oh, I'll take one." And it broke my heart. But the acceptance that has to come with unconditional love is that your expectations don't mean anything. You have to set your expectations to the side. So I had to find solace and peace in knowing that I had done all I could for somebody. It was up to them to take themselves the rest of the way. I wasn't angry about it. There was no hostility. And I knew that this other gentleman was put there to test Richard. And Richard, I won't say he failed that test, but Richard did that part that he knew how to do. His own agreements, his own form of self-punishment took over. It overrided his human instinct to love himself in that moment. But he saw unconditional love. And I know to this day that no matter what happened to Richard, I learned unconditional love in that moment. I saw it, I did it, and I taught it. So there have been many other instances before, during, and after that that I could tell you, but I think that one really typifies everything that is required with unconditional love, to really accept it, to really give it, to really experience it. Because I could have made a scene. I could have told him no, this, that, the other. I could have done all these things. But when you go back and you study anybody that was trying to live in that unconditional love space, the great ones, I'll say the great ones, the ones that I hold in high regard or esteem, they did what they did. They told the story. They made the analogy. They compared something with a metaphor, whether it was Christ in the Bible or Allah or Krishna or anybody. They didn't force anything. They allowed the human to take the lesson that was shown and move on and do it. Hey, what you learn from it is on you, right?
Yeah, true.
It's not on me. Like you said, it's not on us what you do. It's not up to me to control your narrative in your head. If I did, that's manipulation. Even if it was from a loving place, it's manipulation.
Right.
So in order to do the best I can and to be the best I can with the tools that I have in this present moment, I'm just going to love you. And what you do with that is totally up to you. And when you come back to me with anything other than love, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to love you again. And eventually, you might catch on. And eventually, instead of telling me something that I did hear from somebody in the past, which was, I hate how happy you are, maybe you'll learn to feel what it's like to be so happy.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's so worth it. You know, it's so worth it. And I apologize for that. My apologies for that long-winded story,
That's
but
okay.
there's a lot there, I think.
Yeah, that was an absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. And I think it
Good.
is a perfect example of unconditional love. And it resonates so deeply with some experiences that I've had, as well as makes me appreciate those moments where maybe I didn't feel unconditional love, because that also was another growth opportunity for me. So I think that is just probably one of the most beautiful stories of unconditional love I've ever heard. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I hold it near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, because I know I'm kind of watching the time here, what traits, like when you started, I call it a journey of healing. I don't know what your terminology is it for, but when you started this beautiful journey of healing, what traits do you think that you had? What skills did you get to learn? Because I think that it takes both, right? We have traits, and whatever those traits are, we get to either find the ego in it and maybe withdraw the ego, or the trait is something that sustains us through this journey of acquiring skills and self-forgiveness and unconditional love and all the things. So what traits and skills would you say that you started this whole journey with and gained?
Yeah. So I call it a journey of remembrance, right? That's something I like to refer to it as. It's not so much of, like, some people call it an awakening, but to me, I feel like we have everything inside of us already. I feel that, like, when we were made in or from that image of God, and I'm not speaking the religious in the box, Christianism, God, I mean source, right? when we were made, I believe that we were given every bit of anything we would ever need. And I would love to be able to have a conversation with a baby after they're born, because I think it's probably the smartest human ever. And then they get a little dumbed down, if you will. Like they get softened and they get conditioned. And as again, Don Miguel Ruiz would say, they become domesticated. Okay. So in the Western world, we become domesticated and schooled, not educated. We become domesticated, then schooled into how to become a factory employee.
Right.
And we all operate in a factory. And that factory is one that, whether people want to admit it or not, we are slaves in. So we do it so that we keep the machine going. If you don't feed the machine what it wants, which is consumerism, the corporations don't stay in power, don't stay wealthy, and the people that are in charge of them, they much to do the same. So having said all of that, what did I have in me and what did I gain or learn or remember? What I had in me was a young boy who in this world is supposed to live in a masculine sense, right? That was raised by a woman who was forced to be in her masculine body. So the young boy was forced to take on the feminine role in that relationship, which was more of a sibling relationship, really, of survival, than it was a mother-son relationship. And God bless her for it. I am so thankful that's how it was, because a young boy learning how to live in his feminine self removes himself from the notion of nature over nurture. I learned to nurture other people because I hadn't been nurtured. I learned to serve and protect because I hadn't been served or protected. So those things were in me, but they were forced to come to the surface at an early age. So then you fast forward a little bit and you take this young person who wasn't served or protected, and I decided I wanted to go and serve and protect. So then the military taught me how to live in a masculine body, but because I lived in my feminine body so long, I didn't buy it all. Like I had it in me to overcome the bullshit, and I was enough of a truth seer, so to speak, at least in my own mind, that like I'll take, like, you can tell me this, but I'm only going to retain so much of it. The rest of it I'm going to leave behind. Much like when I take my grandmother to a church service, I hear you, but you're not molding this person, right? So what I had in me allowed me to take what was given to me that I needed to be schooled on, and then educate myself in it, right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
there are, like, we try to get educated by being schooled on something, but you can't become educated by getting schooled, because the school has its own idea of what they want you to do. My place I come from, the place I'm trying to go, needs an education. So what was given to me throughout my life were different instances, people, scenarios where I could find the education that my system, my government, my family, my ancestors failed to provide me. I found my own education. So was that education external, or was it simply a reflection of what was internal that I needed to remember? Potato, tomato, I don't know, but the way I view it is it was all inside already. I needed things to trigger the remembrance and the discipline. I needed to have the discipline that the military taught me, to know that what they were trying to teach me wasn't what I needed. So it's this weird thing where, like, the perpetrator of a crime is there to teach the victim that they were an easy victim. And that's not to say that anybody ever deserves to be hurt, raped, murdered, robbed. But as a people, I think that it's really important that we all realize that we want to be victims. because there's no accountability in that. There's no responsibility in being a victim. As soon as you stand up and take action and become strong and take your power back from the would-be perpetrators or the government or whatever it is you want to put that label to, you become the empowered. Now you have responsibility and you're accountable, and that's some scary stuff. That's really where the rubber meets the road. What do you do now that you're no longer a victim?
Now what?
You can't sit back and point your fingers anymore. Right. So that's again, that's probably a long-winded way to say that I had everything in me that I needed to find the things that I thought I wanted so I could really see what I needed to remember, right? Like it was all there. I had a very fortunate scenario of having my world flipped inside out and upside down early on. And I love a good choose your own ending book. Like I grew up reading those things and I adored them. And now I know why.
Yes.
Because we all get to choose our own ending. You don't have to accept the ending that somebody gives you. You can create your own. You can find the light that is at the end of every tunnel, and you can seek it out in any way you want. And the path to that light isn't always the path that's in front of you. Sometimes it's the path off the path. Yeah. And that's cool too. I think it's like the most important thing in all of that is to say that as long as you try to find balance and center in anything that takes you off of your path, you'll realize that there is something to get you to where you want to go. It could be a circle, it could be a straight line, it could be a zigzag. And here's the greatest part of all of this. When you think you've gotten there, you're nowhere close. Right? Like, yeah. You're not even close. You thought you got somewhere, but then you look around and you go, oh my gosh, I'm just getting started. Like, how beautiful. Yes. You know, it's a gift that keeps giving. And if you accept the gratitude and all of it, then you get excited again every time because you say, oh my goodness, there's so much I'd forgotten along the way that I'd learned, that now like I'm at this new base camp climbing a mountain and I get to retain everything that I've learned. I haven't forgotten this time. I'm going to push forward. I'm going to gain some more. I'm going to forget some more. And then I'll do it again. And then I'll do it again. And I think that that's something that maybe a lot of historical figures that were viewed as knowledge seekers or shaman or medicine people or healers, is that they never thought that they had it. They never, but in the seeking, in the searching is where they found themselves being so much different than those around them that just wanted the answer, right? I've hung out with a lot of theologian types that they do something so well. They won't give you the answer. You got to go find it. And I think it's the same with these people that were great yogis or shamans or healers. You don't go and pay them money and say, give me the answers.
Right.
You go and you beat the hell out of yourself, you know?
Right. It truly, truly is about the journey. I mean, for sure, we know the destination, right? I mean, like it's life. And it's, as my friend always says, it's life. We know the L is life. We know the E is ending. It's that if in between, that journey that really does create our opportunity to kind of decide how strong that ending is, I guess, in a way. You know, I absolutely believe that the whole reason for my existence is for the evolution of my soul, born in that perfect moment, being that perfect child or that perfect baby in that moment after 9 months or whatever of gestation, didn't need anything in that 9 months. And all of a sudden the world is like telling us what we need. You know, we did fine for 9 months all by ourselves. And then the world is sort of like telling us what we need, and we're forgetting about how we were. And then we spend like our adult life trying to get back to that perfect place, right? And that's what the whole beauty of it. I watched a movie last night by Wayne Dyer, and it's called Shift. And I think you'd enjoy it. I'll have to figure out how to send it to you. But it was really interesting, and that's what how he described that beginning. You know, after 9 months, we didn't need anything there. We did okay. We had everything we needed. We knew everything we needed to know, and I just loved how he intimated that. I just thought it was really beautiful. So
It really, yeah, it really is like to take yourself back to the most basic thing ever and to realize that you were perfect. That gives you a chance to forgive yourself and say, well, I didn't really, I mean, while I accepted the agreements, I didn't know any better. Well, I accepted the conditioning, I didn't know how not to. And I was taught that fitting in and assimilating was more important than my own happiness. So, okay, I can forgive myself for that.
yeah.
You know, that's, it seems pretty easy, you know, in hindsight.
Yes, and I think the difference between you and I is that we're willing to, number one, invest in ourselves, both financially and emotionally, spiritually, physically. I mean, all the things, right? And I'm just going to say that the majority of the people don't want to do that because it's a scary place. I don't know if it was for you, but when I decided to make that decision to really play full out, if you will, and got myself a coach that could guide me through that process and offer a safe space for all of that to happen, I got to really deal with some real fear, because
Yeah, 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 I would second that.
Mhm. Until I really
Yeah,
embraced choice is a powerful thing, suffering is optional. When I really honestly believed that I had a choice in this matter, and really because I didn't believe that, you know, I thought that I was born into this family and my life was laid out for me. This is what I was going to do because that was the expectation, my perceived expectation of everyone else. And so I'll just check off, check off, check off until that time
yeah,
came, that I was knocked to my knees, right? I mean, I
yeah,
remember that vividly, two instances. I didn't really fall the first time, but the second time I really did. And thought,
yeah, yeah,
I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to deal. Scary as hell. Don't know what it's going to look like.
yeah,
However, some part of me had to know it was going to be better than the constant turmoil and pain that I was in. And for me, it was a huge spiritual turmoil and a huge spiritual pain that I now embrace as the greatest gift ever, because that is what has allowed.
yeah, yeah. So isn't it funny how isn't it beautiful how Rumi said, you know, the wound is where the light comes in. So if we keep that in mind in one hand, and then in the other hand, we tell ourselves what you just said was the fear that we have to face to become unfearful is the same fear that put us in a predicament to where we would need to do that.
Yeah, true.
Yes. So the healing is in the wound that was required to precipitate the healing or the knowing or the remembering, the awakening. So how could any truly sane person, and I don't mean worldly sane, I mean truly sane person, be angry at all of the hurt that helped them become whole? It was all teachable moments. It was all beautifully placed, like like a million piece puzzle where nobody knows what it's going to look like. Nobody knows even what their own piece looks like. But eventually you figure out that other pieces fit with yours and you find commonality, you find peace in that, you find acceptance and validation, and you still don't know what the puzzle looks like, but you have faith that you're doing your part in holding this piece with you and that piece with that one, and you don't get mad at it because that piece doesn't look like yours. You love it because if it did look like yours, it wouldn't work, right?
I
So there is so much beauty and so much gratitude in that for me. I pray every day that others can find themselves in their version of that, whatever that means. And I don't know if everybody in this world is supposed to, or if there are people that are here to do the opposite, to challenge us so that we can overcome, to be our hurdle, so to speak. I don't know how any of that works. Therefore, I don't know what this puzzle really looks like. So I just find a lot of gratitude in the way I feel and the way that I can live my life. Um, I hope that that is possible for others. I really do.
And I was sitting here processing as you were talking that, saying that if all of my life, all the experiences, all the really cool shit that happened up until this moment, and same for you, if that's what brought us to this moment right here, if that's what it took for one person to identify themselves through your story, then the journey has been worth it in terms of.
That's right. That's right.
And that's my hope. That's my dream. And that is certainly wish that happens. So thank you
100%.
for sharing this part of your journey. Just really quickly, I want people to know what you're doing, because I introduced you as a musician and a vocalist, and so.
Oh, sure. That's a part of me. That's just not all of me. I am a vocalist in two different bands, and they're probably not everybody's cup of tea. But I grew up a punk rock skateboarding kid, so that's sort of what I know. One of them is called the Divine March, and one of them is called Don't Get Dead. And that "Don't Get Dead" is absolutely a play on words, and it really is the struggle to not get physically dead, but to absolutely allow the old part of you to die. There's a lot to that. So it's a lot of storytelling for me. I've written my entire life, whether you call it poetry or short stories or, whatever. Now that I'm not trying to deliver it in and from that painful place, it seems to be received in a much better light, because, that's one of those traps that we fall for, or one of those tricks. We feel as artists that in order to be successful or good at what you do, it has to come from pain. And then when you no longer feel pain, you're scared that you're going to lose that edge, or that's not true. And I hope that somebody else hears this. When you can acknowledge the pain, but share the lesson in it from love, that is where we do our service to humanity. That is where we brighten the light that is the lantern of the world. That is where we become the lighthouse for the blind, if you will. Yeah. That is where it happens. So that is what I'm doing musically. I facilitate a small group on Facebook called Patterns Interrupted. And it's just a place for people to share some things like this, like what we've talked about today. We were hosting a weekly conference call on Zoom, and it's very successful. It's some lovely people. But I recently decided that a part of my learning is that I have goals for myself, for my children, for this new family that I'm forming now, that I had to step back from doing for others the way I've done forever. And that is giving myself away completely all of the time. And then I come home and my family, friends, or loved ones don't have all of me to enjoy. And that can't happen anymore. So what I've done is I've made the decision to stand up a small company, again, for myself, that is one-on-one, didactic, just communications and coaching. It's not for anything other than to really be able to dedicate myself to individuals one-on-one, to their needs, to manage changes that they incur along this path. I don't know everything, but I've lived a lot of lives in this life, and I do believe prior, that have helped me to be able to communicate in some different way to where people can understand what I'm saying, and then they can apply it to their own path. And so now I'm going to apply my energy during the day to helping others one-on-one. And hopefully that helps somebody out. That's where I'm headed.
I think that's beautiful. And my last comment is, I think the name of your book, called Don't Get Dead would be perfect.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Get that bug right now.
yeah, I think, yeah, I think that there's something to it. What's funny is when we first formed a few years back, before we ever recorded or started playing out or sharing it, it was very slow and methodical, which I loved because it forced me to settle myself down. I was always a go, go, go guy, especially after the military. But it forced me to learn patience. So the name of the band was originally Don't Get Dead and the Can't Get Rights, which I adore. And I think it's the greatest thing ever. But we decided as a whole, like we do everything in that band, that it was a little too wordy and some people may not be able to get it. And so it may get in the way. But I'm glad we did because we've all gotten right in our own right. We have all found our way in this journey and we all help each other find our way musically, which again isn't our doing. It comes through us and we just have the beautiful ability and presence to be able to shape it into something that other people can understand. And a lot of times it's a message that hurt people need to hear. And so it doesn't come across as really pretty or polished in the beginning until you listen to the entire and realize like, oh my goodness, there's something in this that sounds familiar. And then it becomes your own song. And that's our goal.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy,
Thank
for
you.
spending your time with me. And I feel very confident that this has made the difference in at least one person's life, if not 1,000. And
I hope.
really, really appreciate you reaching out and us forming this conversation and this friendship. I'm sure that this is not the end of it. So anything I can do for you, you let me know. And I know exactly where you are too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I am truly blessed and thankful for all of it. I hope that your listeners get as much out of it as I've gotten out of just sitting here.
Right.
So appreciate it.